I was 32 years old when I realized I'd been living someone else's life. Not metaphorically, not in some vague existential way. I mean, I'd spent 3 decades performing a role I never auditioned for, saying lines I didn't write, kissing someone I didn't love. And the man who should have been mine was living 2 blocks away the entire time. If this story touches you, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps more than you know. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, in a neighborhood called Audubon Downriver, where everyone knew everyone's business and privacy was a polite fiction. My parents ran a small printing shop on North Monroe Street, the kind of place that still did wedding invitations by hand and kept a Rolodex instead of a customer database. I was their only child, and they loved me the way you love something breakable. When I was 19, I started dating a girl named Amber. She was sweet, blonde, the kind of person who laughed easily and never questioned the script we were all supposed to follow. We met in AP English. She passed me notes folded into elaborate shapes. I married her when I was 23. I didn't love her, not the way you're supposed to love someone you marry, but I didn't know that yet. I thought love was compatibility, shared routines, the absence of conflict. I thought it was enough that she made me feel safe in a world that had always felt slightly hostile. We bought a house in the Shadle Park neighborhood, a modest split level with a backyard that needed work and a basement I turned into a woodworking shop. I got a job as a quality control inspector at a food processing plant on the west side of town. It was boring, repetitive work, but it paid well and had good benefits. Amber worked as a bridal consultant at a boutique downtown. Our lives were neat, predictable, uneventful. For 9 years, I woke up next to her and felt nothing. Not resentment, not affection, just a kind of mild static. I told myself this was normal. I told myself marriage was supposed to be steady, not passionate. I told myself I was lucky. Then I met Julian at a hardware store on Division Street. It was a Saturday afternoon in late March, and I was looking for a specific type of hinge for a cabinet I was building. The store was one of those old-fashioned places with creaky wooden floors and bins of loose screws, the kind that smelled like sawdust and machine oil. I was crouched in an aisle digging through a box of hardware when someone said, "You're not going to find what you need in there." I looked up. He was tall, lean, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and gray-green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a faded denim shirt with the sleeves rolled up and jeans that had paint stains on the thighs. "Excuse me," I said. "Those are exterior hinges," he said, nodding at the box. "You're building a cabinet, right? You need interior hinges, softer, close, better finish. They're 2 aisles over." I stood up slowly. "How did you know I was building a cabinet?" He smiled. It was the kind of smile that felt like a secret. "You've got sawdust in your hair and a pencil behind your ear. Also, you've been muttering measurements under your breath for the last 5 minutes. I reached up and brushed at my hair, embarrassed. I didn't realize I was talking out loud. "Most people don't," he said. "I'm Julian, by the way." "Troy," I said and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and it lasted half a second longer than it should have. He walked me to the right aisle, pulled down a box of hinges, and explained the differences between concealed, semi-concealed, and full overlay mounting. He spoke with the confidence of someone who'd spent years working with his hands, and I found myself watching his mouth as he talked. When he finished, I thanked him and turned to leave. But then he said, "Do you live around here?" I nodded. "Shadle Park." "No kidding," he said. "I'm in Audubon just off Crestline. We're practically neighbors." Something in my chest shifted. I didn't have a name for it yet, but it felt like the moment before a storm breaks. We ran into each other 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Once at a coffee shop on Northwest Boulevard, once at the library on East Indiana Avenue, and once at a farmer's market in Kendall Yards. Each time, we talked a little longer. Each time, I felt the static in my life grow louder, more unbearable. The 4th time, he invited me to see his workshop. Julian was a custom cabinet maker. He rented a small industrial space in an old warehouse near the railroad tracks off Trent Avenue, the kind of building that still had original brick walls and metal-framed windows. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and lacquer. Half-finished pieces of furniture stood in various stages of completion, raw wood waiting to be shaped into something beautiful. "This is incredible," I said, running my hand along the edge of a table he was building. The grain was perfect, the joints seamless. "Thanks," he said. "I've been doing this for about 8 years. It's not always profitable, but it's mine." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was standing in a shaft of late afternoon light, dust motes floating around him like snow, and I thought, I have never wanted anything the way I want this moment to last forever. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Are you happy?" The question landed like a punch. I opened my mouth to lie, to say yes, of course, why wouldn't I be, but the words wouldn't come. "I don't know," I said finally. "I don't think I've ever really thought about it." He nodded slowly. "I was married once," he said, "to a woman for 4 years I thought I was supposed to be. I thought if I just tried hard enough I could make it work, but you can't build a life on trying." I stared at him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it. "I'm not trying to," he started, then stopped. "I just mean you don't have to live a life that doesn't fit." I left the workshop 20 minutes later and drove home in silence. Amber was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming along to the radio, chopping vegetables for dinner. She smiled at me, asked how my day was, and I felt like I was watching her from the other side of a window. That night, lying in bed next to her, I finally let myself think the thing I'd been avoiding for 9 years. I was gay. I had always been gay. And I had built an entire life around pretending I wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Julian and I saw each other almost every day. We met for coffee, for walks along the Centennial Trail, for long conversations in his workshop. We didn't touch. We didn't cross any lines. But the air between us was electric, charged with everything we weren't saying. I knew what I had to do, I just didn't know how to do it. One evening in mid-April, I came home and found Amber sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of mail in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, and her expression was careful, guarded. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach dropped. "Okay," she took a breath. "You've been different lately, distracted, distant." I thought maybe it was work or stress, but it's not, is it? I sat down across from her. "No," I said quietly, "it's not." "Are you seeing someone?" "No," I said. "I haven't, nothing has happened. But I've met someone, and it's made me realize something I should have realized a long time ago." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "What? I'm gay, Amber." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and irreversible. She was quiet for a long time, then she said, "I think I've always known." That broke me. I started crying, and she reached across the table and took my hand, and we sat there together, mourning the life we'd tried to build. We separated 2 weeks later. It was amicable, as these things go. She moved in with her sister in Coeur d'Alene. I stayed in the house. We agreed to sell it eventually, but neither of us had the energy to deal with it yet. I called Julian the day after she left. "Can I see you?" I said. "Of course," he said. "Where? Your workshop?" When I got there, he was waiting outside, leaning against the brick wall with his hands in his pockets. The sun was setting behind him, turning the sky pink and gold. "I told her," I said. "I told Amber we're separating." He nodded slowly. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I said, "and relieved. And like I've been holding my breath for 30 years and I'm finally allowed to exhale." He stepped closer. "Troy, I don't know how to do this," I said. "I don't know how to be this person. But I want to try with you, if you'll let me." He kissed me then, soft and careful, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been. The first few months were a mix of exhilaration and terror. I moved out of the house in Shadle Park and into a small apartment in the Logan neighborhood, a second-floor unit with hardwood floors and windows that overlooked Monroe Street. It was half the size of the house, but it felt twice as free. Julian and I took things slowly. We went on actual dates, dinner at the Mizuna restaurant downtown, a concert at the Bing Crosby Theater, long drives out to Sullivan Lake in the Colville National Forest. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our fears, the years we'd both spent trying to fit into shapes that didn't match our outlines. He told me about his ex-wife, a woman named Trisha who he'd met in college. They'd stayed friends after the divorce, which I found both admirable and slightly intimidating. I told him about Amber, about the guilt I carried for wasting 9 years of her life. "You didn't waste it," he said one night as we sat on his couch, my head resting on his shoulder. "You were both doing the best you could with what you knew. That's not waste, that's just life." I wanted to believe him. Coming out to my parents was harder. I drove to their house on a Sunday afternoon in June. rehearsing the conversation in my head the entire way. When I got there, my father was in the garage, organizing tools, and my mother was in the garden, pruning roses. I sat with them at the kitchen table and told them everything. My father didn't say anything for a long time. My mother cried quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I wish you'd told us sooner," she said finally. "I wish you hadn't felt like you had to hide." "I didn't know how," I said. "I didn't even know how to tell myself." My father cleared his throat. "This man you're seeing, Julian. Is he good to you?" "Yes," I said. "He's very good to me." He nodded. "That's what matters, then." It wasn't perfect. There were moments of awkwardness, of adjustment, of unspoken questions. But they didn't turn me away, and that was more than I'd allowed myself to hope for. Work was a different story. I didn't make an announcement, but word got around. A few coworkers stopped talking to me. One guy, a shift supervisor named Dale, started making comments under his breath whenever I walked by. I reported it to HR, but nothing changed. In August, I quit. It felt reckless and liberating in equal measure. "What are you going to do?" Julian asked when I told him. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm good with my hands." "I'll figure something out," he grinned. "How do you feel about learning to build furniture?" I started apprenticing with him the following week. It turned out I had a knack for it. Years of woodworking as a hobby had given me a foundation, and Julian was a patient teacher. We worked side by side in the workshop, sanding and shaping and finishing. And for the first time in my life, my work felt like an extension of who I was instead of a mask I wore. By October, we were living together. He'd been renting a small bungalow in the Audubon neighborhood, a 1920s craftsman with a front porch and a backyard full of overgrown lilac bushes. We painted the living room a warm gray, refinished the floors, and built a bookshelf that took up an entire wall. It felt like playing house, except it wasn't play. It was real. It was mine. But reality has a way of creeping in, even when you're happy. One afternoon in early November, I ran into Amber at a grocery store on Francis Avenue. I was in the cereal aisle, debating between two brands, when I looked up and saw her standing 10 feet away with a cart full of groceries. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Hi," she said finally. "Hi," I said. She looked good, healthier somehow. Her hair was shorter and she was wearing a jacket I didn't recognize. "How are you?" I asked. "I'm okay," she said. "I'm seeing someone actually." "His name's Keith. He's a teacher in Coeur d'Alene. It's still new, but it's good." Relief washed over me. "I'm so glad, Amber, really," she nodded. "I heard you're with someone too." "Julian, right?" "Yeah," I said. Yeah. She smiled, and it was sad but genuine. "I hope you're happy, Troy. I really do." "You too," I said. We stood there for another moment. Two people who'd once promised forever and learned that sometimes forever is shorter than you think. Then she pushed her cart forward, gave me a small wave, and disappeared around the corner. I stood in the cereal aisle for a long time after that, holding a box of cornflakes and trying not to cry. That night I told Julian about the encounter. We were sitting on the couch, a fire crackling in the fireplace, and he listened without interrupting. "Do you regret it?" he asked when I finished. "Leaving her? No," I said, "but I regret hurting her. I regret not figuring this out sooner." He took my hand. "You can't live in the past, Troy. You can't keep punishing yourself for not knowing something you had no way of knowing." "I know," I said, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." "No," he said. "It doesn't." Winter came, and with it a kind of settling. Julian and I fell into routines: coffee in the morning, work in the afternoon, dinner together at night. We watched old movies on the couch, argued about whether to get a dog, talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms. One evening in December, we were walking through Manito Park, bundled in coats and scarves, our breath fogging in the cold air. The park was nearly empty, just us and a few other people braving the chill. "I've been thinking about something," Julian said. "Yeah. I want to expand the workshop, hire another person, maybe two. Start taking on bigger projects, but I can't do it alone." I stopped walking. "What are you saying?" He turned to face me, his cheeks red from the cold. "I'm saying I want you to be my partner. Not just in the workshop, in everything." My heart was pounding. "Julian, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "I just wanted you to know I want to build a life with you, Troy. A real one, not the life you thought you were supposed to have. The one you actually want." I kissed him then, right there in the middle of the park, and I didn't care who saw. But even as I said yes, Even as I let myself imagine the future he was offering, there was a small voice in the back of my mind whispering, "What if you're not done paying for the past?" Spring arrived slowly in Spokane, the snow melting in uneven patches and the trees budding reluctantly. Julian and I spent most of March working on plans for the expanded workshop. We found a larger space in the Perry district, an old auto repair shop with high ceilings and plenty of natural light. The rent was steep, but Julian had been saving for years, and I'd put aside most of what I'd made from selling the house in Shadle Park. We signed the lease in early April and spent the next 6 weeks transforming the space. We built workbenches, installed shelving, painted the walls a clean white. Julian hired a young guy named Finn to help with the finishing work, a recent graduate from the community college who was eager and careful with details. I took on the role of project manager and secondary craftsman, learning as I went. We opened in late May with a small open house. My parents came, along with a handful of Julian's longtime clients and a few friends we'd made in the neighborhood. It was modest, informal, but it felt like a beginning. The business grew steadily over the summer. We took on custom orders, dining tables, bookshelves, a full kitchen renovation for a couple in South Hill. The work was demanding, but it was ours. Every morning I woke up next to Julian, drank coffee on our front porch, and drove to a job I loved. It felt almost too good to be real. In August, my mother called. "Your father's in the hospital," she said, her voice tight with worry. "He had a heart attack this morning. They're doing tests now, but the doctor says it was significant." I was at the workshop when she called. Julian saw my face and immediately asked what was wrong. "It's my dad," I said. "I need to go." He grabbed his keys. "I'm driving you." We spent the next 3 days at Sacred Heart Medical Center, sitting in waiting rooms and drinking terrible coffee from vending machines. My father had bypass surgery on the second day. The procedure went well, but recovery would be long. My mother looked exhausted, older than I'd ever seen her. She sat in the corner of the hospital room, gripping her purse in her lap, staring at my father's sleeping face. "He's going to be okay," I said, sitting down next to her. She nodded. "I know." "But it scared me, Troy. I keep thinking about all the things we haven't done yet, all the time we've wasted being afraid." I took her hand. "What do you mean?" She looked at me. "I mean, I'm sorry. For not being more supportive when you told us about Julian. For making you feel like you had to hide for so long. Your father and I, we grew up in a different time and we thought we were protecting you, but we were just making you smaller." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Mom, I want you to be happy," she said. "I want you to live the life you're supposed to live, and I want to know Julian better, really know him, not just as the man you're seeing, but as family." The word family broke something open in me. I hugged her and she held on tight. When my father woke up later that afternoon, groggy and irritable from the medication, the first thing he said was, "Where's Julian?" "In the waiting room," I said. "Go get him," my father said. "I want to talk to him." I found Julian sitting by the window, scrolling through his phone. When I told him, he looked nervous. "What does he want to talk about?" Julian asked. "I don't know," I said, "but he asked for you." We walked back to the room together. My mother stepped out to give them privacy, and I started to follow, but my father waved me back. "Stay," he said. Julian stood at the foot of the bed, his hands in his pockets. My father studied him for a long moment, then said, "Thank you." Julian blinked. "For what?" "For making my son happy," my father said. "For being patient with him, for helping him figure out who he was supposed to be." Julian's voice was quiet. "He did that himself, sir. I just got lucky enough to be there." My father smiled, a small, tired smile. "Take care of him." "I will," Julian said. "I promise." My father came home 2 weeks later. Recovery was slow, but he followed the doctor's orders with a determination I'd never seen in him before. My mother hovered, cooking heart-healthy meals and monitoring his medication schedule with military precision. Julian and I visited every Sunday. We'd bring groceries, help with yard work, and sit on the back patio, talking about the business, the weather, anything but the fear that had settled over all of us. In September, Julian proposed. We were at the workshop, finishing up a dining set for a client in Spokane Valley. It was late, past 9, and we were both covered in sawdust and exhausted. I was running my hand along the edge of the table, checking for imperfections, when Julian said, "I have something for you." I looked up. He was holding a small wooden box, the kind we made for clients who wanted custom jewelry storage. But this one was different, inlaid with lighter wood, forming a pattern of interlocking lines. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said. Inside was a simple silver band. "I know we've only been together a year and a half," Julian said. "And I know you've already lived one life you didn't choose. So I'm not asking you to say yes right now. I'm just asking if you'd consider building a life with me. A real one. The kind where we get to decide what it looks like." I stared at the ring, then at him. "You made this box." "Of course I did," he said. "You think I'd trust anyone else to hold this?" I laughed, and then I cried, and then I said yes. We got married in November, a small ceremony at a vineyard in Walla Walla. My parents were there, along with a handful of friends and Finn, who served as Julian's best man. Amber sent a card with a handwritten note. "I'm so happy for you. You deserve this." It was simple, quiet, and exactly what we wanted. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. Not because anything was wrong, but because I kept waiting for something to go wrong. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to tell me I wasn't allowed to be this happy. But it didn't happen. Life just kept going. The business kept growing. My father's health stabilized. Julian and I adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Sawyer who liked to sleep in the workshop while we worked. In the spring, we took a trip to the San Juan Islands, renting a cabin near Friday Harbor and spending a week hiking, kayaking, and doing absolutely nothing. One afternoon, we were sitting on the beach, watching the sun set over the water, and Julian said, "Do you ever think about the life you had before?" "Sometimes," I said, "but not the way I used to. I used to think of it as wasted time. Now I think of it as the road I had to take to get here." He leaned his head on my shoulder. "I'm glad you took it." "Me too," I said. 2 years after we got married, we bought a house in the Comstock neighborhood, a 1940s bungalow with a big backyard and enough space for a home workshop. We spent weekends renovating, tearing out old carpet and repainting walls, building the life we talked about in vague terms and turning it into something solid. My parents came over for dinner once a month. My mother brought casseroles, and my father brought unsolicited advice about plumbing. Julian's ex-wife, Tricia, visited from Seattle a few times a year, and we all got along better than I would have thought possible. I ran into Amber one more time at a wedding in Coeur d'Alene. She was there with Keith, who turned out to be kind and funny and clearly crazy about her. We talked for a few minutes, polite and warm, and when we said goodbye, it felt like closure. I was 37 when I realized I'd spent the last 5 years living the right life. Not a perfect life. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt, but a life that fit. One evening in late October, Julian and I were sitting on our back porch, wrapped in blankets, drinking cider and watching the leaves fall. Sawyer was asleep at our feet, snoring softly. "I've been thinking," Julian said. "Dangerous," I said. He smiled. "I want to teach, not full-time, but maybe a class at the community college, intro to woodworking or something. Pass on what I know." "That sounds perfect," I said. "You'd be great at it." He was quiet for a moment. "What about you? What do you want?" I thought about it. "This," I said finally. "I want this. You, the workshop, the house, the dog. I spent 30 years trying to figure out what I was supposed to want. Now I know." He kissed me, soft and slow, and I thought about all the years I'd wasted, all the time I'd spent living someone else's script. And then I thought about everything that had come after, the fear, the courage, the slow, painful work of becoming myself. I thought about Amber building a new life in Coeur d'Alene. I thought about my father recovering and relearning how to live. I thought about my mother